Buddy. In this recording, I'm going to take one of our earlier lessons and show how we can develop it further by simply duplicating layers and modifying keyframes to create a more interesting animation. And then I'm also going to show how we can start to develop our work further by incorporating video and sound effects into our projects. So I'm going to start with my car race example from one of the earlier lessons. I've got my project file saved right here, so I'll just double click it. And in the earlier lesson, I animated one of the cars going around this racetrack. So I'm going to add another car to go around the racetrack as well. I'll turn one of those layers back on, the yellow car here. And to get started, I'll simply select the position animation that I did in the previous lesson for the red car. And when I click on the word position, all of the keyframes for that animation are selected. And I can simply go edit copy and then select my yellow car layer, bring my time marker to where I want to paste the keyframes, and then choose edit, paste. Now, when I paste the keyframes, they may not show right away. So on the keyboard, I'll type the U key to reveal animating properties. That's the same thing as choosing animation, reveal properties with keyframes. The U key, that's worth remembering. Okay, so now the red car and the yellow car are doing the exact same thing, which means they're in the same place at the same time. So I'm going to modify things a little bit. Notice also, though, that the yellow car is not rotating like the red car does, so I do need to select that layer and choose Layer, Transform, Auto Orient, and turn on that Auto Orient rotation feature. Now the cars are in exactly the same places. So I'm going to lock my red car layer by clicking the lock switch. That way I can work with just the yellow car layer. And I'm going to go ahead and maybe slide some of these keyframes around a little bit to offset my timing. So that way they're not going to be in exactly the same place at the same time. And then I may also move some of the keyframes by clicking and dragging the keyframe icons here. And so I want to start it in a different spot and not have it follow the exact same path as the red car. So you can see I'm just going around here and dragging keyframes to different spots to kind of vary my animation, adjusting the Bezier curve handles, and so forth. Now, once I've done that, I will go ahead and test my animation. So let's see here. I'm going to move this last keyframe down there. Okay, now I'll turn the red car layer back on. Or actually, it is already on, and I'll go ahead and preview and see what I've got. So the cars are not in exactly the same place, so that's good. But now what I'd like to do is make this animation a little bit more interesting. And I think what I'll do is I'll have the yellow car crash into the red car and spin out off the side of the racetrack. To make the two cars crash into each other, I'm going to need to modify my animation for at least one of the cars here. So I think what I'll do is right around here, I'm going to take this keyframe for the yellow car and maybe pull it this way a little bit so that the cars are a little closer together. And then right here, and you know what, maybe I'll have the red car spin out. So what I'll do is I'll select the red car layer, I'll unlock it, and I want to add a keyframe at this point in time. So I'll click the Add Keyframe button right there, and then I'm going to delete the keyframes that come after that point. Okay, and it looks like I might need to zoom in here a little bit too, because look, there's a keyframe right there that I don't need. So I'm going to delete that. And so that way, when the yellow car kind of bumps into it here, what I'll have happen is I'll go a little bit forward and I'll drag the red car over here. And I'm also going to animate the rotation. So I'll do Shift and the letter R. And so when the yellow car taps into the red car right there, right about there, I'm going to set a rotation keyframe. Let me zoom in here so I can see these keyframes a little better, maybe open up my timing a little bit. And then as the red car gets knocked off to the side here, I'm going to have it spin around a bunch of times. So I'll grab the rotation tool and spin it around a few times like that. A second rotation keyframe is set. So the yellow car taps the red car, boom, it spins out. Actually looks like maybe I want it to spin the other way. So let me change that value. Instead of a -2, maybe I'll make that a +3. And let's see how that looks. All right, pretty good. Maybe open up that timing just a little bit more. Let me preview. All right, that looked pretty good. Now, of course, I could sit here and, try and finesse that even more, but I think that's good enough for my demonstration. And the next thing I want to do is when the car spins out over here, I want to add an explosion. So what I've got in my assets folder out here on my desktop is an MP4 file that I grabbed off the internet of some stock footage of a fireball. And it's got a black background. Most stock footage of fire and things is going to be on a black background like this. So I'm going to bring this in and use this in my animation. So I'll import that MP4 file, and then I'll go ahead and drop it into my composition here. You can see it's quite large. And when we add a movie or sound file to an After Effects composition, it's going to have a set duration. So notice I can't extend the out point beyond the length of that movie. Now I can click on the layer and slide the movie, or the layer I should say, to the right or the left to control where it's going to be on the timeline. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim an in point right when the fireball sort of starts to happen. So I can do that by clicking on the in point of that layer and dragging it over, or by typing Option and the left bracket key on the keyboard. Option and the left bracket, or Alt left bracket on the PC. Now I want to be able to adjust the scale of this, so first I'm going to take the anchor point tool, put the pivot point in the middle of the fireball. That way, when I show the scale property, hitting S on the keyboard, I can scale it, and it's going to scale from the middle of that fireball. So what I want to do is grab my move tool now, and I'm going to place this so that right when my car spins out and comes to a rest, I'm going to have the explosion appear. And then I'm going to drag it over and put it over the car. Now, what about that black background? So I wanted to start to introduce the blending options here that you see in the timeline. Now, if they're not showing on your screen, it's this little button right here. The second button from the bottom left will show or hide the blending mode and track matte columns. And the blending modes are pretty much the same, or a lot of them are the same as what we have in Photoshop for blending layers together. They basically control the way that the layer blends with the underlying layers. And they do that in many cases by defining what's called a neutral color, or a color to become transparent. So in the darken group, the transparent color is white. In the lighten group, the transparent color is black. So any of these blending modes in this lighten group will make the black background disappear. So screen is probably the best one to use in this case, but you can experiment here with different options, and they will all in that group make the black background disappear. The only difference is how the color pixels are blended. So Like I said, screen is probably the best one in this case. So I choose that, and then boom, fireball happens. And what I'm going to do is trim an out point for my red car layer by dragging the out point over, or by hitting Option and the right bracket. Option and the right bracket to trim an out point. So when the fireball clears, the car won't be there anymore. Okay, let me bring out my work area, hit play. All right, pretty cool. Now if I want to fine tune the fireball a little more here, I can adjust the scale or placement as needed. And then lastly, for this demonstration, I'm going to add some sound effects because I haven't added sound effects in any of the previous demonstrations. So I'll come back here to my desktop. I have a sound effects folder with 4 different sound effect files. I'll grab those and bring them in. And I'll put them in a folder in my project panel here just to keep things organized. And I'll name that folder Sound Effects so that it matches my organization on the desktop. Now to add sound effects to my movie, I basically just drag them into the timeline. So I'm going to drag in these 2 car sound effects. And just like the movie file, they have a set duration, whatever the length of that sound effect is. Now with a sound file, if you open it up and expand this audio group, you'll see a levels property that you can animate to control the volume of that layer. And you'll also see a waveform group where you can see a visual representation of that audio waveform, which will give you an idea of how loud it is and if it's fading in or out. Okay, so you can hear that and see that. Now I'll go ahead and add the other sound effect as well. I've got a couple of them here. A keyboard shortcut to show the levels and the waveform properties is the letter L on your keyboard. If you push L once, it displays the levels property. If you push the L key twice, it solos out the waveform property. So I think in this case, I'm going to use that first or top one here. And I think I need that to maybe start a little later, so I'll trim an in point a little later and slide it over. And then right over here where my yellow car taps my red car and sends it spinning, I think what I'll do is fade this out very quickly. So I'll hit L for levels, set a keyframe for audio levels, leaving it at 0, and then I'll go a little bit forward. And to fade it out, I'll put it down to about -30. If I look at my waveform, by hitting Shift and hitting LL, or by expanding the waveform group, you can see that that's creating a fade out. I'm going to trim an out point by hitting Option and the right bracket key so that faded out pretty quick. Now I'm going to have the other sound file playing just below it. So let's see how that sounds, or hear how that sounds. Okay, that's pretty good. Now I'm going to add my explosion and screech effect. So I'll bring those in as well. Again, I slide it over. If I want to see the waveform, I hit LL. So I'm going to have it start to screech right around there. And then I'll trim an out point maybe right about there and put the explosion right where the fireball starts to happen. And again, I want to show the waveform so I can line it up. There we go. And let me go ahead and do a preview and see how that looks and hear how the sound effects are sounding. All right, so at the very end here, I want this sound effect to fade out as the car comes to a stop. So for my last step, I will show that levels property. I'll set a keyframe for levels and maybe slide it back a little bit. And then again, put it down to about maybe about -30. And then I'll trim an out point by hitting Option and the right bracket key. Let's see how that worked out. All right, pretty good. If I want to finesse that a little bit, I might slide the keyframes around or extend my out point to, control the timing. And hopefully this gives you some ideas for how you can start incorporating sound effects into your work, as well as duplicating layers and modifying keyframes and adding some simple video to further embellish the work as well. Here, let's take one more look. And there we have it. All right, I'll see you in the next lesson.